Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today, we are going to be looking at a single source, and this is going to be a speech given by former President Trump at the World Economic Forum in Davos.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and this is just 4 days into his second term.
Okay.
And it's really kind of sets the stage for what he wants to do with America and its place in the world.
Interesting. So he goes right back to Davos, even after all the tension in his first term.
Exactly. And it's interesting because he comes out with this very strong statement that his election victory was a revolution of common sense, the most significant election in over a century.
A revolution of common sense. I like that.
Right. And he lays out his vision, and he starts immediately with economic policy.
Okay.
Talking about all these actions he's taken already, like executive orders on inflation, a hiring freeze, deregulation, withdrawing from the Paris Climate Accord.
Yeah, he doesn't waste any time, does he?
No, he doesn't. And the way he talks about it, it's very striking. You know, he uses words like disasters, calamity, ruinous policies.
Right. Very strong language.
It's like he's painting this picture of America in crisis before he came along.
Yeah, like he's the hero coming in to save the day.
Exactly. And his solution, economic nationalism.
Okay, so we're going back to Make America Great Again.
Basically, he doubles down on that message here. He's pushing for massive tax cuts, especially for domestic manufacturing, to get companies to bring jobs back to America.
And how is that going over with the folks at Davos?
Well, he actually shares this anecdote about how he personally expedited approvals for a big energy project in Louisiana.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he contrasts it with all the red tape in the EU. It's like he's saying, look, I'm a man of action. I get things done.
It's a good story. I mean, it definitely makes him seem decisive. What do you think, listener? Would this kind of approach actually work in the long run?
It's a good question. And it's not just about economics either. This whole America First thing, it kind of spills over into his foreign policy as well.
In what way?
Well, he talks about making America strong and sovereign again, cracking down on illegal immigration, restoring what he calls the fair and impartial rule of law.
Okay, so a pretty hardline stance.
Yeah, and he doesn't shy away from social issues either. He reiterates his belief that there are only two genders, and he criticizes all the DEI stuff, diversity, equity, inclusion.
Yeah, that's definitely going to ruffle some feathers at Davos, I imagine.
For sure. But it really shows you how his worldview is shaping his policies. And this America First approach is really evident when he talks about international agreements.
How so?
He says that the U.S. has been taken advantage of in trade deals, especially with countries like Canada, Mexico, and China.
Oh, yeah. He's always had a lot to say about trade.
Right. And he even says this thing about Canada, and I'm quoting here, you can always become a state.
Wow. Now, is he serious or is he just playing to the crowd a little bit?
It's hard to say, but it definitely shows that he wants America to be in control, you know, calling the shots.
Interesting. So we've got economic nationalism, a focus on American sovereignty, and a hard line on trade. What else?
Well, then there's this really interesting shift. He starts talking about peace.
Peace. That seems a little unexpected, given everything else he's been saying.
Right? You've got this tough-talking leader who's been talking about tariffs and America first, and then suddenly he's pivoting to peace. It's fascinating.
I'm intrigued. Let's dig into that a bit more when we get back.
Yeah, it's like he wants to project strength, but also wants to be seen as a peacemaker.
Right. It's this interesting balancing act. He talks about the ceasefire in the Middle East, which his administration helped negotiate, and says he hopes for peace between Russia and Ukraine.
Okay.
But then he really gets into the human cost of the war.
Oh.
He describes the carnage he's seen in pictures from the battlefield.
Wow, that's intense.
Yeah, it is. And then he just drops this bombshell.
What?
He says that before the election, he and Putin had private talks about denuclearization.
No way.
Yeah. It makes you wonder what else they talked about.
Seriously. So did anything come of it?
He doesn't really say, but he does mention that China was open to joining the discussions.
So a three-way denuclearization deal? That's a pretty big what if.
It makes you think about what might have been possible.
Yeah, for sure. So is he saying world peace is actually achievable?
I don't know if he goes that far, but it is interesting to see him talk about peace when he's also advocating for a strong military and questioning alliances.
Right. It's like those two things don't really go together.
Exactly. And this tension, this kind of contradiction, it runs through his whole speech.
Like how?
Well, you see it in his economic policies, too. He wants to protect American jobs, but he also likes free trade agreements.
Huh.
And with foreign policy, he talks about American strength, but then he also wants to work with other countries, on his terms, of course.
Okay, so it's complicated.
It is very complicated, but it's what makes his presidency so fascinating to unpack.
Yeah, for sure. So you've got a strong America, a focus on economic nationalism, and this unexpected emphasis on peace. What else is in store for his second term?
Well, he ends on a lighter note, looking ahead to some of the big events coming up, the 250th anniversary of America's founding the World Cup, the Olympics.
Okay.
He seems pretty excited about all that and the chance to show off America to the world.
And of course, he can't resist a little bragging.
Oh, of course not. He says his administration has gotten more done in a few days than others have in years.
Typical Trump.
Exactly. And he jokes about how he never thought he'd be president during all these big events.
Well, at least he's got a sense of humor about it.
Right. It's kind of endearing, actually. And then he says something interesting. He says he might come back to Davos in the future.
Really? After all the stuff he said about globalism and whatnot?
I know, right? It's like he's leaving the door open to engage with the world on his own terms.
So what do you make of all this?
Well, it's clear that Trump is a complex figure. He's a disruptor, but he also wants to be a deal maker. He's a critic of the global order, but he also wants America to play a leading role in the world.
Yeah, he's definitely not easy to pin down.
And that's what makes him so interesting to study. So, what do you think, listener? Can America really put itself first and still shape the global landscape?
Yeah, it really is a fascinating look into how he saw the world, at least at this point in his presidency.
Definitely. I mean, you see his desire for a strong America, his focus on economic nationalism, and yet he still wants to be seen as a peacemaker.
It's an interesting mix, for sure.
Yeah, his approach is certainly unconventional. He wants America first, but he also talks about peace deals and denuclearization. He criticizes global institutions, but then says he's willing to work with other countries, but on his terms, of course.
So is it all just an act? Is he just trying to get what he wants, or does he actually believe in this stuff?
Well, it's hard to say for certain. I mean, some people argue that his approach really shook things up. It forced the world to rethink some of its assumptions about global power.
Okay.
Others say that it just made things more unstable, led to more distrust on the world stage. What do you think, listener? Did Trump change how America interacts with the world?
Another good question. It's something we're still wrestling with today, I think. In this speech, it's a reminder that Trump's second term was definitely not boring.
Not boring at all. He was full of surprises.
That's for sure. He was a showman, a businessman, a politician, all rolled into one.
Exactly. And, whether you agreed with him or not, you can't deny that he had an impact.
Absolutely. And his speech, it really gets to the heart of a big question. What is America's role in the world?
Should it be the world's police? Should it focus on its own interests first? Is there a way to do both?
Those are tough questions, and I don't think there are any easy answers, but they're questions we need to keep asking.
And maybe that's Trump's real legacy. Not the specific policies he put in place, but the fact that he forced us to confront these fundamental questions.
Well said. Well, we've come to the end of another deep dive.
Time flies when you're having fun dissecting history.
That it does. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll be back next time with another single source and another chance to dive deep into the complexities of our world.
Until then, keep questioning, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep learning.